Let's hear it for the home team. So I heard these words of wisdom this week. Do what you can, be who you are, and love or want what you have. I was meeting with Gerry Schley this week, and he said that those words have affected him most of his life and changed him. And I'm actually going to invite him up to speak in a bit because I've asked you to tell your stories to me. And since we're talking about tithing and prosperity, I've asked for some testimonials, if you will, about what it means in your life to be a giver and to be generous and to practice these principles. So this month, as you know, we're celebrating prosperity and generosity. Our theme for the month is Live Long and Prosper. Yay. So I'm going to review some prosperity principles with you that you probably know. The most famous is probably Jesus, who said, "Give and it will be given. Heaped down, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be put into your lap." He also said that to he who has been given, even more will be given, and to he who has not, even that will be taken away. So we get this idea, just coming from Jesus right away, that it is as we give that we receive, right? That we move into this flow of generosity, and that flow of generosity returns to us. It is a spiritual law. Now, the truth is that these spiritual principles, these are practiced in spiritual traditions all over the world, aren't they? Yep. So Buddha said that generosity is the first door that we walk through if we're serious about our spiritual work. So those of you who have practiced Buddhism, who are Buddhists, know that one of the first teachings, before meditation even, is the practice of generosity. The Sufis practice giving. They have 3 stages of giving. The first is giving to a person or an organization. The second is giving anonymously. And the third is giving without attachment. In other words, like taking money and just leaving it outside somewhere. You don't know who's going to pick it up, and the person who picks it up doesn't know who left it there. So there's all these different stages of generosity. Native Americans practice the potlatch celebration. It's a way of redistributing the wealth. Rabbi Shapiro in the Hasidic Tales said that acts of generosity are essential to the spiritual life, reflecting as they do an awareness of the interconnectedness of all beings. Judaism sets a minimum standard for giving, 10% of your earnings, but the Hasid, the compassionate disciple of God, goes beyond the letter of the law. My girlfriend is Jewish. She lives in Tucson, Arizona, and she's an introvert. She doesn't like to really socialize a whole lot, but she goes to temple every Friday night. And she says, I'm one of these people that I go to the temple, I sit in the back, and then I don't stay for coffee or cookies or anything. She's like, I'm out of there as soon as the service is over, but I love it. I go to high holidays, I do the whole thing. And she said she'd been going to temple for, a couple of years, and one day the rabbi tapped her on the shoulder, and he said, you come here every week, don't you? And she said, I do. And he said, I think it's about time that you probably gave us maybe $300 a year. What do you think? And she's like, well, all right, I guess. I thought, well, that's interesting. So I don't think we could get away with doing that here. So she went for a couple of years more, and she said in 2 years, the rabbi came up to her again, and he's like, so I think now you could probably give $500 a year. What do you think? And she's like, oh, okay, whatever, sure. And I thought it's interesting that it's part of the teaching, and it's part of the community, and it's part of the expectation of just being there. So we see that throughout the world, in all spiritual traditions, generosity and giving is kind of one of the basic bottom line tenets. And yet, I think that it's important that as we lay the groundwork for generosity, as we lay the groundwork for prosperity, that we take a step back and go, okay, so I get the teachings about giving and receiving, but it's important that we don't give just because we're supposed to, because it's a spiritual law, and not give from a place of lack, but rather to be authentic in our giving. So I guess my question to you is, what is authentic for you in your practice of generosity and giving? When I was in ministerial school, we had to tithe because we had to. We were taking a prosperity class, and our teacher said, look, if you're going to teach this stuff, guess what? You have to do it. It's like, oh, really? Okay. Because I'd never done it before. And what was interesting was watching how money was just sort of moving around, and how it was, there was the act of giving opened doors that hadn't been opened before, made me aware of things that I wasn't aware of before. And yet, I think it's important to be authentic with our giving. And so one of the things that Hypatia, our teacher, taught us was that what I want you to do, and it was for a period of time, 10 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever it was, she said, I want you to give to the source of your inspiration and of your good. Now, I love that, because it wasn't like you have to give to an institution. You don't have to give to a certain thing and it looks a certain way. And what it caused me to do was every week when I had to write a check, it'd be like, all right, who inspired me this week? Or what inspired me this week? And that's where the money went. And so for me to be authentic with my giving, with my generosity, it meant giving to the source of that connection. And sometimes it was a person. Sometimes it was a church. Sometimes it was a friend, right? So it was always fluid and it was moving. So I think our authenticity in our generosity and giving is what is important. Now I'm going to take a step back and go to the book of Exodus in the 10 Commandments, chapter 20, verse 17. He said, and the 10 Commandments are all the things that we shouldn't do, right? You shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. So I want to talk about this coveting thing. What does it mean when we covet? When we covet something, it's like, I really want this, or maybe I want what you have. And when I want what you have, it can stir up feelings of envy and jealousy, right? And who wants to feel envy and jealousy? That's the opposite of generosity. But the thing that I noticed about coveting is that when we're coveting, it keeps us from the present moment, right? So it's like when I want something that you have, then it means I'm dissatisfied with what I have. So coveting not only keeps us from being in the present moment, but it takes it even a step further. When we're in the place of coveting, we're dissatisfied with the present moment. You ever been dissatisfied with the present moment? Now, I'm not talking about not wanting to improve and have dreams and have goals, but to be in that place of coveting keeps us dissatisfied because we don't appreciate what we have. So have you ever said, I'd be happy if we got a new car. I'd be happy maybe if I went on a cruise. I'd be happy if, you can fill that in, right? So one of the things for me is I'd be happy if I remodeled my kitchen. I would be really happy about that. And that's a great thing because I can make plans and I can think about what would that look like and how would that go. Where it starts to cross a line is, you're coveting if I walk in my kitchen and I don't like my kitchen, right? And I go, I don't like this, I don't like that. And so instead of appreciating and loving what I have, I'm finding fault with it. You guys ever do anything like that? Right? So that's the thou shalt not, right? So we still move forward and we still follow our dreams, and we also love what we have. There's an old story from Tibet about two brothers, and one of the brothers had 99 horses, and the other brother only had one horse. Now, the brother with 99 horses thought, if my brother would give me that one horse, I'd have an even 100 horses. What is wrong with my brother that he won't give me the one horse? And the guy who had the one horse is like, if my brother would just give me one horse, then I'd have 2 horses. I don't know what is wrong with my brother. And the point of this story is no matter what we have, there's always something else, or there's always something more. It's not enough. Doesn't matter whether it's 100 or it's 1, but there's that lack consciousness, and that is the place that we don't want to give from. That is the place where we want to move beyond. So the first step in prosperity, the first step in abundance, the first step in generosity is to want what you have, right? That means to use it, to appreciate it, and to take care of it. If you don't like your car, fix it up, clean it, make it look better. Love and appreciate. And, truthfully, when we love and appreciate those things that we have, it almost becomes an act of worship. And if you're not loving and appreciating what you have, then maybe it's time that it is given away. Mike Robbins said, in other words, to create an authentic sense of fulfillment in life, we have to learn how to want what we already have in our lives with gratitude. By putting more of our attention on wanting what we already have and less attention on fixing things or wanting what we don't have, we can create a deep sense of peace and joy in our lives, in our work, and in our relationships. And the truth is our possessions aren't going to last anyway, right? I mean, everything is, that's the lesson, I think. That's the message that seems to be up for everybody right now, is that life is impermanent, that our possessions are impermanent. And yet, we are in this present moment, and we are loving and appreciating what is. So, there's a talk that we're going through the steps of the building, of taking the building down and rebuilding another one. But it doesn't mean that we don't take care of this building as it is right now. You may have noticed we put a fence out here, this year. And, some thought was, well, why should we do that if we're going to make some changes? Why wouldn't we do it, right? Why wouldn't we lovingly care for this building as we have it and as it is now? So, Gerry, I'm going to invite you to come up, if you would, and to share your experience. I'll get the microphone for you. Come on all the way up so they can see you. Your experience of giving. So, Gerry Schley is our current board president. He is former board treasurer. And a man of wisdom.
I don't know about
Pressure's
that.
on, Gerry.
Thank you. Well, I don't appreciate speaking after Reverend Karen. I want you to know. Because she does such a wonderful, wonderful job. So when she asked me to share a little bit of my story, and I'd be happy to do that, but I'm just going to give you the G-rated version of it. I'm not going to give you the sordid details. I'm going to save that for my autobiography. So I grew up in New York City, and as kids, we used to, look at each other with a lot of wisdom and say, what goes around comes around. And for us, we didn't know it at the time, but that was essentially the law of karma. What goes around comes around. And as a child, I attended Williams Institutional CME Church, and when it came time to pass the collection plate, the good Reverend White would say, he who gives sparingly shall reap also sparingly, but he who gives bountifully shall reap also bountifully, for the Lord loveth a cheerful giver. And so he'd say, put me to the test, that the Lord of hosts, and see if I will not open up the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing that there shall not be room enough to receive. So it was my beloved Aunt Beatrice who introduced me to unity principles through a subscription to the Daily Word. And so the seeds of spirituality had been planted in my heart at a young age. But as a young man, I sort of lost my way, and I wasn't living my life according to spiritual laws. I was living in Chicago, and bad things kept happening to me. It was like I was at war with my environment. The final straw came when, after a heavy snowstorm, the roof of my apartment literally collapsed and fell down all around me. I decided then to get my act together. It was clear to me that the universe was not fooling around. So I moved to Seattle, started my life over, got a new job, started a new career, and then things started working a lot better for me. I found Seattle Unity. Things, I've been blessed beyond belief. I am grateful for my family and my friends, Reverend Karen, Amoja, the men's group. We have such a great time together. And my former business colleagues and this spiritual community. What goes around comes around. And Forest Church was a theologian, and I shared this with Reverend Karen, and she liked this idea, and she made it the focus of her sermon today. He was a theologian of a progressive church in New York City. He died a few years ago, but he said something that really resonated with me to this day. When asked for parting words of wisdom, he replied, "Do what you can, want what you have, and be who you are." There are 8 million stories in the Naked City. This has been one of them. Namaste.
Thank you, Gerry. Gerry was treasurer for 2 years or 3? 2. And the treasurer is not always the easiest position to have on a board, because sometimes those numbers go into the red, and it becomes a real test of one's faith and one's really positive attitude to be able to look at those numbers and be able to turn them around. And it's always Gary is now our current treasurer, and it's always like us putting your feet to the fire, I think. And Gerry, you were such a great example to all of us in living a prosperous and generous life. You've always been very generous. Thank you. So when we love and appreciate the things that we have in life, we increase them. You know, we're coming from a place then of abundance rather than of lack. And the truth is that even as well as we take care of the things that we love, when we're coming from that place and appreciation, those things are not going to last, right? This building is going to go through a major change. I had the experience this week of, many of you may have seen the pictures at the left field bleachers at Wrigley Field. A bulldozer came and destroyed it. And they started with the spot where I stood. For years, I watched hundreds of games from this one spot, and I was so familiar with that spot that I knew exactly the movement of the sun. I knew how the shadows would fall throughout the whole place. I mean, that place was so comforting. You know, so every year when I would go back to Chicago, I would go and I would stand in that one place. And then I see on the cover of the newspaper, here's this bulldozer, and it's totally smashed the place where I stood. And it was like a part of my life had been just taken away and gone. And you know, with Richard dying, there's a part of my life that has been taken and gone. And don't you have that experience every time someone you love makes their transition, or you go home and maybe things have changed drastically and nothing is the same? And Jesus said, you know, don't put your faith in your possessions where the moths get in and the rust come and the robbers come. Put your faith in the Spirit of God. Your treasure should be in heaven. Your treasure is in heaven. So as we practice the principles of generosity, as we practice the principles of abundance, as we do it, we recognize that it's all impermanent anyway. And yet, we love it, right? We appreciate it. We honor it, and it keeps us fully present in this moment. These are principles that are taught in Buddhism, Sufism, the Muslim religion, Christianity, Judaism, native peoples. And yet, as we learn these principles and continue to unpack them next week, take a step back and ask yourself, what does authentic giving mean to me? What does authentic generosity mean to me? Be who you are, love what you have, and do what you can. Thank you.